Here to give us his take is Brian Brooks, CEO of Bitfury. Brian, good to have you to weigh in on this. I think it makes sense to dial back a little bit, right? So Bitcoin goes up like 500% from November 2020, to March or so of last year in a few months' time. And so we've given back some of that. And is it just that, crypto overshot to the upside along with a lot of other assets that are tied to this sort of technological future? Or is there something else going on that we should be concerned about in terms of the health of the kind of crypto project?
Yeah, Mike, these are great questions. I mean, look, in an efficient market, buyers and sellers are doing so for a reason. And there's some things going on right now, short term, that are a little bit negative for Bitcoin, but only short term. So, for example, the Fed is announcing, some mild inflation fighting strategy for 2022. And one of the things about Bitcoin in particular is it's a hedge against inflation. So if you think inflation is going to go down, that'll have some modestly negative price effects. But Mike, the really, really interesting news here, if you're looking medium term instead of short term, is the Goldman Sachs report that just came out a few days ago showing that Bitcoin is now 20% of the total global store of value market compared to gold. 20% of the gold market. That's insane. And what that predicts, according to Goldman Sachs, is a future where Bitcoin price in the medium term hits 100,000, right, as it achieves parity with gold as a store of value. So most of us in the sector remain quite bullish.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, and that certainly has been one line of reasoning, that it is essentially a digital form of gold, a perhaps less correlated asset that maybe protects against, central bank mistakes or inflation or something like that. However, when Bitcoin and other cryptos were shooting higher, we were told by many that it showed that there was all of this real world application, excitement over actual development. It's going to create a new version of the internet. And that's what the prices were telling us, not that it's just a store of value as an asset.
Yeah, well, so look, this is where I always tell people, if you're new to this space, that there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else. So, Bitcoin has some really interesting things happening on it. But the real Web3 stuff, that's happening elsewhere. That's happening on Ethereum and Solana and in the Cardano ecosystem and with NFT platforms and things like that. And for that, all I can tell you is, if you look in the history of the really innovative internet stocks, even Google in its early days, they had periods of time where they fell by 50% because it was a new technology that was achieving adoption first among hobbyists, then across mainstream users, and finally mass retail. We're still new to Web3. It's a new concept, and yet development activity is enormously high. So, yeah, there are a lot of things happening all at once. Some of them have to do with stock prices. Some of them have to do with inflation. Others of them have to do with new internet technologies. They just all happen to be in the same broad category at the same time.
Brian, I'm curious how this price slide is impacting your business as a miner, whether you're still able to grow in this kind of environment and whether you're still able to gear up for an IPO in Europe, which the reporting indicates that you were about to do.
Yeah, well, first of all, the sort of profitability of Bitcoin mining is only partly a function of Bitcoin price. It's also a function of hash rate and who among the miners can capture the most market share. So what I can tell you is Bitfury is doing great in terms of our pipeline of new developments, of our power partnerships, especially with renewable energy providers. All of that looks terrific, and we'll grow market share in this setting, absolutely. In terms of an IPO, look, we're going to go and have an IPO when we're ready. The IPO will probably be in the U.S., probably not in Europe. But in the meantime, we're in the market raising money to help us fund some of these new investments, and I feel nothing but great about the future. It's a really good time to be the low-cost provider of this asset.
Brian, thanks very much. Come back and update us when the time comes. Appreciate it.